Thank you, and good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. My name is Pierre Fricke. I'm the Director of Product Line Management, Product Marketing for Integration and BPM at Red Hat, and I'm joined by my friend and partner, Ian Goldsmith, VP of Product Management at SOA Software. And today we're going to talk about the benefits of API management with the JBoss Enterprise SOA Platform, ESB, and SOA Software, which is an exciting topic. We've moved quite far along in the industry in terms of maturity with respect to service-oriented architecture. Obviously, with the cloud assets and various things, we've got proliferation of APIs, this notion of APIs, which we're going to talk about, and it's a very interesting topic we get asked about a lot by our customers. So what are we going to touch on? I'm just going to do a very brief introduction to the SOA platform for those of you all don't know what it is. I'm not going to spend much time on it. Then I'm going to go into a deployment type of scenario that kind of gives you an idea, a rough idea of some kind of things we need to consider as people build out this notion of an intelligent integrated enterprise, integrating assets, publishing APIs, how to, and how you might deal with business events and integrating apps in general and stuff like that. Of course, that's going to set the stage then for governing that deployment, governing the APIs in the deployment, which SOA Software is a leading vendor and partner on. Ian will go through a lot of that detail. We'll wrap up and then we'll do Q&A. Look forward to your questions at the end too, because we have some interesting discussions and feedback on the discussions around those questions as well. So let's take a look at the JBoss Enterprise SOA platform. To summarize it in one sentence, it's a flexible standards-based platform to integrate applications, SOA services, business events, and automate business processes. It's centered on an ESB. Like many ESBs, it integrates services. You register the services on the UDI registry. In this case, we have UDI version 3, and by the way, it is included in the SOA platform. Many products, you have to buy a separate thing to get that. So UDI version 3 registry where you can register services. We have orchestration capabilities, JBPM for Java Developer Workflow, BPEL for service orchestration. We have a rules engine based on the Rules Expert project that's used for intelligent content-based routing, and also can be a runtime platform for rules and works with the JBoss Enterprise BRMS. On the left-hand side, of course, we have the JBoss Developer Studio. This includes a bunch of tooling for application development for App Platform and Portal Platform, and, of course, integration development tools for the SOA platform, tools for the BRMS, etc. Common environment, common type of familiar Eclipse environment. On the management and governance side, we have something called JBoss Operations Network, which helps with provisioning, provisioning, patch management, and some what we call really kind of simple runtime governance, which is really service monitoring just of JBoss assets, and it's a good thing for those that want to use that type of thing. And of course, when you want to go to heterogeneous and enterprise level governance, that's when you bring in SOA software to help expand that. We support, in addition to service integration, we support enterprise application integration, or EAI, with adapter-based integration. We set the foundation for an event-driven architecture, which I'll go through in the next slides. I'm not going to go through everything on the slide, but this basically is our SOA platform, which is our ESB. So let's go walk through a little bit of a scenario here of the notion of an enterprise as they're moving things to the cloud and they're starting to put more applications and integrate them and so forth. Everybody's got online applications of some kind, web-facing, e-commerce, or self-service type applications. These things drive a lot of business events because customers interact with your business more increasingly through online applications. By the way, it's not just PCs or laptops; it's mobile devices, it's other things too. The online application is actually an interesting thing to put in the cloud, and for the following reason. One is it's already customer-facing. It's not a repository of all your key customer data. Or financial data or things like that. So it's kind of a thing that people are quite comfortable with putting in the cloud from a comfort level. And then beyond that, of course, it's an area that you have spiky workloads, the elasticity, and provisioning the right amount of hardware as opposed to provisioning for the highest factor of demand can save a lot of money. The value proposition of cloud basically can be realized very easily here. Like a mortgage business will have spiky workloads in May, June, around the peak spring selling season. Retailers with a lot of Christmas-type stuff and gifts will spike out in November, December, late December. You'll see other types of sites that may have summer things going on and spike out in July, and they're pretty dead other parts of the year. And so that's an ideal type of application to move to the cloud. In that type of application, you may also have APIs for other parties and partners or other people to interact with your website beyond just a web browser type interface or a rich application. You may actually have APIs that you're publishing out, and Ian's going to get into some of what those are. You also have financial business data sources, financial applications. These are the things that you run your business on. These data sources could be in relational databases. They could be in spreadsheets. They could be in different kinds of formats or applications themselves. And, of course, this stuff you almost certainly are not putting in the cloud, at least not a public cloud or a hybrid cloud. You probably have it on a private cloud or a virtualized environment or something like that. Down the pike, as you get more comfortable with cloud, you may put things like that out there. But in some cases, regulations may preclude you from putting it into a public-type environment. Then we have our line of business applications and services. And we also have customer relationship data, customer support type applications. You know, the CRM thing, of course, the poster child for software as a service is Salesforce.com. You may have something, your data, customer data up in that kind of a software as a service type environment. You may have business services that you're leveraging, like, Credit Check could be a web service that could be hosted in the cloud. There may be other types of things that you have a hybrid type cloud for that, depending on the demands of your workload and timing of it and how much hardware you need to provision for it. Other things may be internal type of thing. Some of these things may generate APIs, particularly supply chain type applications and other type of applications that may be critical for your businesses, but also critical for interacting with your partners. And then we add to that the extended enterprise. And really, the Internet's moving beyond just systems and web browsers. It's moving to this notion of field-embedded mobile devices, high-value assets. There's also mobile phones and things like that. But this particular graphic really centers on things like in logistics. It might be cars, trucks. It might be ships. It might be containers. It might be in the military, tanks or planes or jets. In the airlines, it could be planes. It could be railroad cars. Could be lots of things like that. And these things increasingly have intelligence on board. These things generate business events about location and status that the business has to process in order to be more effective, and processing them manually is almost impossible depending on the volume of them, which could be quite large. And so we now need to bring these things together and integrate the business. We integrate these things with the SOA platform, with our ESB, the online application, working with may need to work with the financial applications, the business applications, and customer applications to process orders. And use the ESB and service orchestration to coordinate those things and integrate those things. We have the data services platform to give a virtualized view of data sources. For example, you may have customer data back in your financial data sources relating to your customers' creditworthiness and other things. You may have customer relationship data out in the CRM app and Salesforce.com. You may have some in some spreadsheets or in sales and marketing type of other types of applications. If you want to get a holistic view of customer rather than hard coding all that to some of these line of business applications, you can use the data services platform with a visual tool to define a view of what a customer is that the application needs, and it's transactionally coherent and everything else. And it certainly saves a lot on development time. It adds a level of data governance, data security that you don't get with the hard coding, and it makes it a lot easier to change. We can integrate the field, these mobile and devices, with merge messaging based on a standard AMQP, and we can add intelligence to this integrated enterprise with the JBoss Enterprise BRMS. There's a set of algorithms and rules of decisions we have to make about customers, pricing things for them, offering them specials based on a set of events or parameters around that customer or partner. The BRMS is ideally suited to doing that kind of business logic and that kind of calculation and decision making. We also are interested in business events, that may be going on in the field that are being generated and coming in on messaging, and BRMS can help us make decisions about, allocating transportation, scheduling, and whatever it may be that we have to deal with in that venue. Now, what you see here is really, this is a vision for our customers. When you have this type of infrastructure, you actually are able to respond to business events in real time with high-quality answers, products, and services on a cost-effective basis, a very competitive type of deployment. Now that we've got this set up, and as we're setting it up, there's going to be APIs and services generated across these applications. They'll publish APIs on our online applications, our partner-type applications. Ian's going to take us through some of those things. And so we need to govern and manage these APIs and services. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ian of SOA Software, who will take the next steps in this discussion. Ian?
Great. Thanks very much, Pierre. Thanks for teeing all that up. Okay, so just real quick introduction. I'm Ian Goldsmith, VP of Product Management at SOA Software. So basically that means I live at the interface between customers and engineering. So I'll try to take a fairly balanced approach to the discussion. What I want to talk about is primarily the world of API management, specifically getting into a conversation about how APIs relate to SOA, and we first sort of need to start with a level set, really, around the term API, because it's an old term. It's been used extensively, but the new use, the more modern use of the term is a little bit different. So just as a quick walk back into the distant sands of time, in the late 90s, early 2000s, we were starting to get into the world of web services. And the idea was that web services were going to provide a mechanism for business-to-business communication. It was going to replace EDI and all these kind of things. Now, for a variety of reasons that we won't delve into, that didn't really happen. And web services became used more commonly for kind of lightweight EAI-type applications inside the enterprise. And that evolved fairly quickly into this concept of SOA, or service-oriented architecture. And service-oriented architecture certainly has some ties with web services, but it's not limited to web services. And I'm, by the way, using a very generalized term of web services. I'm not specifically referring to SOAP and those kinds of things. I'm discussing a web service in the context of a piece of business functionality exposed out of an application in a way that other applications can consume. And so that service foundation became the sort of core of SOA. Now, more recently, what we're seeing is sort of a redux in APIs, or in the original goal of services being for business-to-business and outside the enterprise communication. And in part, that's been driven by some technology change, so the advent of RESTful services, and specifically JSON and other lighter weight content types has facilitated some of this. But more importantly, I think we've got the mobile world driving a new way of looking at how you expose your business externally. And we're going to talk about that specifically. But so really, that rather long-winded preamble was just to say that when we talk in this deck about APIs, I'm going to use the terms APIs and services almost interchangeably. I'll explain what I mean specifically about how APIs relate to services, but the two things are highly related. And so what we want to cover, let's go a little bit, there we go. What we want to cover is a little bit about APIs and why you need them, how SOA forms the underlying foundation of your API initiatives, what happens if you don't govern your API initiatives effectively, what our solution looks like for API management, SOA governance, and then discuss why open source is important specifically in the API world and how SOA Software and JBoSS work together. So with that, why would you use APIs? What is it about APIs that are exciting businesses and are making people adopt these things today? Well, standard business reasons. We're in business, not charity at the end of the day. So it's about making money, saving money, so doing more with less, growing your brand, the technology track of moving to the cloud, which really is about efficiency. And then mobility is a huge one. Well, mobility is really the wrong term, because certainly of these 1,200 devices that Netflix is available on, most are TVs and DVD players and things like that are not mobile, but they're different channels for the business. And at the end of the day, that's what an API is. It is a new way of bringing your core business to market. So looking at some of these things, there are some surprising numbers here. And by the way, the numbers I'm presenting are from the end of 2010, beginning of 2011. So a lot of these things have changed significantly already. But back at the end of 2010, more than 60% of eBay's listings were coming via their APIs, which may come as a huge surprise. Certainly was to me. I use eBay through the website, but the API enables a whole bunch of other ways for people to list things on eBay. So an enormous channel for eBay. Amazon Web Services is fundamentally an API platform. So things like S3, the storage solution, are API enabled, allowing companies like SmugMug, the photo storing concept, to save huge amounts of money by leveraging inexpensive online storage, and at the same time allowing Amazon to grow its business through use of its API. One of the more surprising things on here is the Google Maps growth versus MapQuest growth. And while you can't entirely blame the lack of MapQuest growth on their lack of an API, it's certainly a factor. Because Google Maps has an API, it's really easy to integrate it with other things. So when you look at most applications that you find out there that have location and mapping services, they'll be using the Google Maps API on the back end. Much like eBay, Salesforce has more than 50% of its transactions coming over its API, and Netflix is, of course, the poster child for APIs, and the 2008 launch of its API completely transformed Netflix's business. Now, whether that transformation has been a good thing long term is an entirely different question, but it certainly transformed the business. They moved from being a logistics company shipping DVDs to being a streaming media delivery company, all by exposing an API. Now, what's particularly interesting about the Netflix story is that, depending on who you talk to at Netflix, they will tell you that this transformation wasn't entirely intentional. They had customers saying to them, hey, you've got all these movies, we'd kind of like to watch them over the web. So they built a JavaScript web client, web application effectively, that ran in the browser, allowing customers to browse their catalog and view movies. Now, the interesting thing then wasn't the fact that Netflix did that. It was that the APIs that they exposed to enable that activity became public. They were publicized, and so other companies, most notably Apple, got their hands on them and integrated those APIs with a client running on the iOS devices, which then became an enormous driver of another channel for Netflix. So the whole streaming media business became a huge extension and expansion of what Netflix did, eventually changing the business and flipping it completely on its head. So it's kind of that concept of being able to reach people you had no idea you could reach in ways you didn't know you could reach them that's really what makes the API so appealing. We'll move on a little bit more about that. But so just some straight stats. API growth has been huge. I think as of end of 2011, it was about 4,500 APIs. These are APIs registered on programmable web, by the way. So it's pretty easy to get these stats and numbers, and they're easily backed up. What really has driven this is this concept of appification. And yes, once again, we can blame Apple and the iPhone for what's happened here. Basically, in the good old days, let me grab a pointer here. In the good old days of web applications, companies built a website and they communicated with their existing customers using that website. And they made themselves findable on search engines so people could find their business. And that was all great. Then along came mobile devices, and with it came WAP and other mobile browser experiences, which frankly are completely inadequate. Pretty much using a browser on a mobile device, even a device as good as the iPhone, is a miserable experience. So what a lot of companies started doing was building their own apps that would run on those devices that communicated with their back-end systems using APIs. Now, that's interesting. I'm reaching the same set of consumers in a different way, but that's still the same set of consumers. What's much more interesting is when you take that same API you've built, you invest a few more developers in strengthening it, maybe adding a couple more APIs to it, and then you publicize those APIs to a group of developers outside your enterprise who can innovate in ways you haven't even begun to dream of. They can think of ways of bringing your business to their customers as opposed to just helping you bring your business to your own customers. So this channel expansion is what makes the world of APIs so interesting. And what we're seeing in the industry today is kind of like the rush to the internet in the late 90s, where companies suddenly realized they desperately needed a web presence. If they didn't, they would go away. And so That's happening again with APIs, and the mobile web is a large driver of that, because what companies are realizing is that internet-connected computers are going to be outnumbered by a factor of about 10 to 1 by internet-connected mobile devices within the next 5 or 10 years. This is happening fast. So mobility is a big driver, but it's not the be-all and end-all of the story. It isn't just about mobile, although it is a huge driver. A lot of what drives API traffic is mashup-centric. So things like TripIt, like Yelp, like Expedia are really great examples of mashups where it's a business that makes its money, makes its own business by aggregating content from other locations and bringing things together. Simple stuff like a Starbucks locator app, which is a mashup of location-based services from Starbucks and Google Maps to help you find your nearest Starbucks when the coffee fix is essential and you've got to get it now. So mashups are great, and they are driving a huge amount of API traffic. The idea of being able to think of APIs as building blocks that a developer can stitch together into their own application is really where we need to be here. So anyway, enough leather about APIs in general. Let's talk specifically about what an API looks like for your business. Well, I already talked about the API sort of being web services come full circle. It is a service typically exposed outside the enterprise, although not necessarily. We actually have several customers who are taking an API-centric view of their internal SOA initiatives, and they're basically saying, look, an API is a service that I've turned into a product. I've productized it by documenting it thoroughly, ensuring it's effectively versioned, making sure it's supported, making sure it's reliable, secure, and I'm packaging it up as a product that I treat in a very special way. And then they look at enterprise services and say, well, that's really how my top-level enterprise services should be thought of. They should be packaged, productized APIs that anyone can use reliably without having to lean too heavily on the organization that created it, because they have the support infrastructure in place. So whether an API is exposed externally or internally, it's still a productized service. And a fundamental requirement for a productized service is that the underlying services that are used to expose that API are reliable, secure, versioned, all of the things that you need for the API itself. So governance for the services that underlie your API initiative and the APIs themselves becomes critical. You have to make sure you're building the right services to support your APIs, and you have to make sure that you're building the right APIs. Same thing with the way you build them. You have to make sure that you're building services correctly so that they can meet the growing demands of the organization. You have to make sure that you're building APIs correctly so that they meet the needs of your consumers. And then you have to ensure that everything's working right. Your APIs are behaving correctly so that the customers who are using your products, your API, are satisfied. You have to make sure that the internal services that are providing the back-end capability for those APIs are reliable and secure so that the APIs behave correctly. It's kind of an extension of core SOA governance. So let's look at SOA governance and what it means and what happens if you don't govern effectively. From a pure SOA perspective, the main reason you have to provide proper governance is that if you don't, you end up failing to realize the benefits that SOA can offer. You don't motivate your teams without effectively communicating your strategy, and therefore they don't drive reuse, which is the main efficiency and agility driver in SOA. With inconsistent execution, you fail to realize benefits because people try something once and then they're like, that didn't work, I don't want to do it again. And so your SOA programs sort of sputter and fail. And so governing effectively helps you ensure that you achieve benefits. Now, subordinate to that are things like production downtime, security breaches, additional complexity. You have to make sure that everything's behaving the way it should behave and that you're not adding risk to your organization and you're not increasing cost and delay in programs while you make this march towards SOA and API strategies. So all of the things that apply to SOA governance apply equally to API governance. And then there's some extension around the outside of that as well that we'll get to. So let's look a little bit about what governance is and how we break it down. You've already heard me use phrases like build the right APIs and services, build them right and run them right. And that's really the core concept in governance. When you look at governance, governance is a scary word. It's not a word that sort of trips off the tongue as something people are excited about. What governance really is the process of encouraging desired behaviors. You want to encourage people to do the things that you want them to do. And so we break governance down into the three core themes of planning, development, and operational governance, i.e. the process of encouraging people to build the right things, build them right, and make sure that things are running right. And those processes span across an enterprise life cycle, which is shown across the bottom of the slide here. Now, the life cycle stages, state transitions, are entirely customizable and flexible, and every organization will typically have its own life cycle process and state transition definitions. In this case, we're showing a modified, rational, unified process with an agile iteration in the middle of it. But as I say, the process that you implement internally inside your organization is going to be different from everybody else's. The key is just to recognize that it does comprise these core basic steps of planning, development, and operations. Now, we take those steps and we layer them on top of a common underlying policy governance theme, the idea being that policies are required to help you with each of these steps of building the right things, building them right, and running them right. And then across the top of that, we provide a sharing infrastructure specifically for your APIs to help you engage your developer community with all three phases of the governance process. So in the build the right API process, you need to be taking input from your developers, from the community of developers outside your enterprise to help you decide, well, what is the right API? What does it look like? How should I version an existing API? Those kind of things. And that sharing activity moves and spans across the entire life cycle. So while I'm developing it, I want to make it visible to the development community externally so they can know that in 2 months' time, I'm going to publish an API that will do this, and they can begin working on their applications. Then obviously the runtime stuff that's where you're consuming your live APIs from. That's how you go get APIs, is by integrating with a runtime system. So we, SOA Software, provide products for each of these core lifecycle stages. The products with red icons are SOA-centric. So for policy governance, we have our Policy Manager product for SOA, and we have a product called Atmosphere Manager for APIs. The two products integrate seamlessly, by the way. For planning, we have Portfolio Manager for SOA and Atmosphere Architect for API governance. And the role of those two products is to essentially implement a peer review-based workflow process for identifying and prioritizing candidate services. It helps you model your to-be architecture, identify and map your as-is architecture, and then put a roadmap in place based upon strategic input and initiatives that will help you get from your as-is to your to-be. And the output of the planning process is a set of individual, independent candidate APIs or services that have been prioritized. And those then move independently into the build process, the development governance process, where for SOA, our Repository Manager product will take over and marshal them through their life cycle, and for APIs, the Atmosphere Developer product will. And what's really happening in the build process here is a workflow process to help you make sure that assets and artifacts are correctly named, identified, and structured at each stage of the life cycle, and that you have an approval process in place for approving development time estimates, cost estimates, delivery dates, etc. And so those two products handle that process and the marshalling and management of assets across the life cycle. And then at some stage in the life cycle, you end up with a running API and a running service and a set of consumers that are consuming those. And that's where the runtime products fit in, and that's our Service Manager for SOA and Atmosphere Broker for operational API management. And what those products are doing is essentially taking the services and protecting them, managing messages on the wire, integrating with existing runtime containers. So we have agents for JBPM, JBoss ESB, and the JBoss App Server to allow you to ensure that services that you expose and applications that expose services in those environments are behaving the way you'd expect them to behave, that they're complying with security policies that are externally defined, that they are complying with SLAs and you're restricting quotas and all those kinds of things. And then laid across the top of all of it is the Atmosphere Community product, which is a developer community portal for enabling collaboration and self-support of the APIs that you choose to publish. So this slide lays out a more detailed technical architecture showing the Policy Manager product and how it integrates as a sort of heart of the entire platform. So if you look at Policy Manager, you can see that it exposes a set of network-deployed governance services, registry services for runtime metadata discovery, policy services for definition, identification, association, and validation of policy, management services for the collection and distribution of metrics, and then security services for authentication, authorization, token exchange, and PKI capabilities all rolled into that platform. And that has a single console for managing the policy aspects of SOA. That is typically driven and fed by services governed by Repository Manager and applications developed via Repository Manager, which in turn is provisioned by the Portfolio Manager product. Policy Manager delivers the Service Manager components or rather supports the Service Manager components for handling messages on the wire, and those components are supported by the Atmosphere Broker entity, and then the Atmosphere Community platform is built on top of the Policy Manager and Atmosphere Manager components that make those up. So a very sophisticated technology set that provides a very rich set of governance capabilities. Looking specifically at what the API management platform is doing around the outside of that, there are really two sides of it. The runtime side, where we manage provisioning, security, monitoring, quality of service management for your APIs, and then the developer community platform that allows you to build partner or dealer portals or developer portals with dashboards, collaboration tooling, forums, social integration and interaction, the ability to promote your APIs through invitation concepts and group development, and then the ideal world of self-supporting developer community. So one of the goals in API management or the development of an API developer community is to enable the community to support itself so that your organization doesn't have to invest enormous amounts of time and energy in supporting the developers that are leveraging your APIs. So why is open source important in this realm, or why is it good to use open source? Well, Pierre touched on some of this earlier in his discussion. If you look at what are the things that API is doing, they're typically exposing your business to customers externally and to partners externally. And if you're in a seasonal business, then you're likely to find the need for dynamic scale is going to be pretty important in your API in the same way that it is for a web infrastructure. And even if you're not, as your business grows and as your API platform becomes more successful, the need to scale up and down your platform over time is going to be critical. So API management, API platforms share a lot in common with the open source world. They provide agile, cost-effective scaling that remains in step with rapid evolutions in technology. If you compare the technology rate of evolution in open source technology with proprietary technology, you'll see that more often than not, the open source platforms are quite a ways ahead in terms of adoption of new standards and systems and technologies than the proprietary environment. So leveraging open source as the underlying scaling concept for the platforms you use to deliver your APIs and as the supporting infrastructure for the API management platform itself is very important. And of course, the Red Hat JBoss open source platforms and solution meet these requirements very effectively. So what does SOA Software do with JBoss specifically? Well, our products provide this integrated or unified API and service delivery and governance automation solution for JBoss, amongst other heterogeneous platforms. Specifically in the JBoss world, we have our network director intermediary, which it works seamlessly with services exposed out of the JBoss platforms. We have agents for various different JBoss components that allow us to handle last-mile security and monitoring, policy enforcement. And then we have the delegate, which handles first-mile policy and an endpoint implementation for applications built on JBoss. Our Policy Manager product supports those platforms, providing the governance for APIs, services, and policy attachment and association. And then we have the Repository Manager and Portfolio Manager products that help you ensure you're building the right services and APIs and building them correctly. And one of the things that's built into that platform is the ability to handle platform selection. So you can use Portfolio Manager in the planning process to help you identify which services and applications you should build in which platform. So there may be some environments where Microsoft makes a better choice. There may be some environments where the IBM tooling provides a better choice. But one of the main decision factors is going to be cost versus capability. And the planning solution will help you make those decisions and help you with platform selection as you work through that process, identifying where JBoss should be used to optimize your cost saving. And then finally, Atmosphere provides that promotion, sharing, and support concept across the API platform. So with that, I'm going to hand the realm back to Pierre to wrap it up. So thank you.
Thanks, Ian. Very good. It's a very important topic in today's world, and with the mobile, social, and cloud aspects that we need to continue to be able to integrate into our business and then manage and govern those APIs and deployments as we've been discussing here. Let me switch over to my slides and just sort of a summary here. This is a place where you can learn some more information. We've got some information about building intelligent integrated enterprise and the SOA platform, as well as SOA Software's products that Ian was taking us through that add significant value to that types of deployments that we've been talking about. We have contact information here for Red Hat and SOA Software, and of course we're going to be at Red Hat Summit and JBoss World in late June, the last week of June. Look forward. Hopefully we will see you all there as well. So with that, let's open it up to questions. I think we got a couple in already, but please feel free to type in the Q&A panel, and we'll be taking a look at those. So one question that came in is, how can I obtain an electronic copy of the presentation slides? I believe these things will be made available in the follow-up emails with your registration. So stay tuned, and thank you for the question. That's an important question and a good question. Another kind of question here is, what forms are these APIs presented? What's the development platform, deployment platform? Let me touch on that first, at least a little bit, and then Ian may have some things to add to that. So we did touch on this some, just to rehash and revisit and maybe add to it a little bit. That as we described these, we've been presenting and publishing services and service-oriented architectures for some time. It's not just web services. We've seen people publish, and not just SOAP-based web services, but as Ian described, it's a pretty broad plethora of technologies. We see things on not just on SOAP, but REST and JSON and even AMQP now, an emerging wire-level protocol that came out of the financial services community that's part of our Red Hat Enterprise messaging product. So there's lots of different ways services, protocols and endpoints, EJB endpoints, other types of endpoints, POJO endpoints, rule services, all kinds of services here. So these things are presented as APIs. They may be presented as WSDLs, they've been presented in the different things I've described. The development platform, deployment type platform, certainly the JBoss Enterprise Application Platform is a popular service development platform. We also have a lot that is developed and published on the SOA platform itself, which builds on the app platform with the ESB and these other capabilities we described earlier. Of course, there's Tomcat and there's lots of other things, legacy things and new programming paradigms, Ruby and all these other things that are out there that we can integrate in, and SOA Software's API management can govern. I don't know if, Ian, you have anything you want to add to that?
No, I think you covered that pretty well, Pierre.
Okay. How do I work with Red Hat and SOA Software to build this solution like you're all talking about here? So that's good, because I think we see a lot of people interested in taking the next steps to improve their existing IT infrastructure. I've done we've done other webinars about how to take steps to do that. But just to summarize it here, you want to be able to understand, what your problem sets are that you're trying to solve in terms of your business process problems and the IT problems associated with the business process. And then you want to design a new, a system that may expose APIs to partners or to your consuming public or supply chain or whatever it might be. You're going to want to, and these things will generate business events that you're going to want to be able to capture and deal with in your applications. That's going to require an integration fabric like our ESB. You're going to maybe want to make some intelligent decisions about the business events that are coming through these APIs and other applications in mobile devices or whatever, and that's where our BRMS comes into play. And so we can help you with that with service engagements. We've got some products, and then SOA Software adds the stuff that we've been talking about here in the product set that Ian described. So what happens is that if we get involved with y'all at Red Hat first, we'll go through and help scope out the problem and help you work within the services engagement, or maybe you've got that figured out and you're looking to work with our sales team and some products. API governance, and SOA governance comes up as a requirement. We bring SOA Software into the deal. We work together closely to make sure the solution works well and fits the needs that you have. Likewise, SOA Software may be involved in managing improving the governance of APIs that may already exist, and as they uncover, there may be things that aren't integrated in their deals. They uncover opportunities that may expand the solution set, and they bring us into the deals as well. We work closely together to certify our products to make sure they tested, QA'd, and are certified. And SOA Software is featured in our partner portal as well. Let's see if there's any other questions. We do have some other questions here. So there's questions about ESB demo coming. There is a demo on the SOA platform website that's centered on a mortgage scenario. So there is a demo out. Just go to the link here that says redhat.com/SOA or the integrated enterprise link, and it'll get you the SOA product page, or search on SOA platform at redhat.com and you'll find a demo out there. How does JBoss integrate clouds with CRM solutions? It's really through standards-based APIs, really. You publish, clouds. If you have a cloud application, you're going to publish either some APIs or web services or something like that. You'd register that as a service on a UDDI registry, or perhaps, make it known through the ESB. CRM, likewise, will may have some service endpoints that could be registered as well. And the ESB can make those things known to other applications that need to call on them. The other way of doing that, of course, could be through connectors. If you want to use more of an EAI style kind of a frame approach, that's another way to deal with it. And finally, you could put AMQP messaging underneath the SOA platform for as opposed to SOAP or something like that. You can use AMQP messaging by plugging in a Red Hat Enterprise messaging platform. So there's some questions here that are probably going to require a more detailed technical discussion than we have time for in the last few minutes. So we may follow up offline on terms of, these. But here's a couple that we could probably answer more easily. Is there a type of API which is more likely to be used for mashups or others? Ian, how about that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think the simple answer is an API that delivers business value to the developer of the mashup application. So And there are some obvious things like a payment API. If someone needs to sell a product, they need a way to get paid, so they'll want to use payments. Geolocation services are pretty popular. I mean, there's obviously Google Maps, but there are some interesting newcomers in that space like CityGrid and folks like that. In terms of type, if you mean technology, I think certainly REST JSON APIs are going to be leveraged more heavily than most other technology types, simply because it makes them, the use of JSON makes them consumable in mobile platforms, whereas SOAP is likely to be less usable in the mobile world. But I think it really comes down to the business value. There's another criteria on all this too, which is ease of use of the API. So an API may be the best thing ever, and it may deliver great value. But if it's hard to use because it's not well documented or there isn't an active support community around it, then it's not going to get leveraged. So that's a lot of what it comes down to. So in terms of type of API, that's a business question more than anything else. But the technologies and the supporting platforms are very important.
Okay. What relation do the discussed APIs have with, if any, with the JBoss ESB gateways? So I think the APIs we're talking about are actually published out of applications, like a web services interface or other types of API architectures that we've been describing here. They're actually published out of applications, or maybe they're specifically focused services. You know, for example, Experian has APIs. eBay has APIs. Some of those APIs that are published out of applications that enable you to interact with those and query those, like credit scores or set up auctions or whatever it might be on eBay, etc. The ESB gateways are actually protocol adapters, essentially, that enable on-ramping of messages from things like FTP, SOAP, HTTP, file drops, email. There's a whole list of them in the SOA platform descriptions and webinars and product pages. So that's pretty much, they're not directly related in the sense, except that they're related in the following way. You might use the ESP gateway to connect some APIs that may be available over one protocol network to applications that may be deployed in another protocol type of network through the ESB. And the ESB itself is a intermediary at the protocol level. It may also do transformation, by the way, between APIs on one set and applications calling them on another set. You may leverage transformation and content-based routing capabilities as well. Go ahead.
There are a couple of questions here that I kind of wanted to take, and I'd
go ahead.
Take them together. And I'm pretty sure they're questions aimed at me around multi-tenancy and size of developer community, a number of APIs published in the developer community. So I want to be very clear that the products that we provide, we're a software company, so we deliver software products to enterprise customers, and so the Atmosphere products are all available as on-prem server products, on-premise server products that our customers can deploy and leverage internally. Now, it is interesting in that Atmosphere we also offer a software as a service solution. So we have a SaaS platform for API management built on Atmosphere. It's available at it's shortly to be available at atmos.phE.re. We haven't launched it yet. It's in the process of finalizing beta testing. But the SaaS platform is a fully multi-tenant environment that enterprise customers can come and sign up for an account for, create their own tenant with their own brand, and be entirely independent of any other user on the system. They can also choose to federate with other tenants and share their own APIs and with the APIs of other tenants on the system, where a developer can connect to a single tenant and have visibility across the federation. So in terms of multi-tenancy, we have a fully multi-tenant platform for SaaS, and we also have the same technology leveraged for our on-prem customers. So as an on-premise customer, you could take the product and build your own multi-tenant environment maybe a different tenant for different departments or business units within the organization.
Okay. Were there any other questions that you wanted to jump on?
I kind of running out a little short on time, I think, but other than that, it looks, I think we've covered most of it. Okay,
yeah, I think there's a couple here that's going to require probably a fairly lengthy discussion about the architecture, the internal workings of the ESB, which we probably ought to handle offline and follow up. So there'll be a way of getting back to us through the follow-ups to do that. All righty, well, I want to thank everyone for attending. And,
thank you very much.
We've enjoyed the webinar, and a real strong audience, a lot of real good questions, some of which are really deep and thoughtful. So we look forward to working with you all. Good luck in your endeavors. Let us help you with your endeavors too, moving forward to integrate partners, to publish APIs to help drive businesses Ian was talking about. We can certainly help you build this notion of an intelligent integrated enterprise, of which this discussion is part of. And you all have a good rest of the day. Thank you.